Hello, this is Dr. Karen Davison, Director of Equine Technical Solutions with Purina Animal Nutrition. Today we're going to talk about the Purina Equine Gastric Health Program. I'd like to take a minute here on slide 2, just before we get into the program, to tell you a little bit about the team that I'm with, and we are the Equine Technical Solutions team, and you can see here we are 6 members strong, and we have different areas of the country that we try to focus on and try to give a little more consistent technical support out in the field. So this is the team that's bringing you content like the Purina Horse Speed Resources Guide, other programs like that, and then we do come out in the field and help with sales calls on large prospects and vet meetings and things like that. So just wanted you to be aware and get to know your technical solutions team. So let's get back to the program at hand. On slide 3, we're going to talk about Purina Equine Gastric Health Program. And you may be wondering what is the focus for on equine gastric health. We have 3 exciting new products that are directed specifically toward that. And if you don't happen to be a horse owner, you may not be aware that there is a significant issue with horses with gastric health. And on slide 4, we kind of explain that. There's a picture on the left of a healthy stomach, inside of a horse's healthy stomach, and this is shown through an endoscope where it's got a camera on it, and you can actually see the lining of the stomach there, and it's all pink and smooth and healthy. And then the one on the right is obviously not. It's got lesions or ulcerations, or what commonly you might think of as being a sore. It would be like a burn or an injury on your skin, and that's inside the horse's stomach, and it can be extremely painful for horses when they develop these ulcerations or lesions, and that's the whole point. When you see the slide on the right, that is obviously a very uncomfortable stomach, so that's where we come to the idea of equine gastric comfort or discomfort. In slide 5, we show you that upwards of 90% of performance horses do experience some level of gastric discomfort, and this varies with different disciplines. Race horses and endurance horses tend to have the highest incidence, but all horses that get ridden or do any kind of work or exercise, and honestly, any horse out there can have this issue, but it is more prevalent in horses who are competing or performing some type of athletic work. In slide 6, you can see an example here of, again, we demand a lot from horses every day, and particularly some horses are going and calling and competing very regularly. Years ago, we may have had a competition season for a lot of disciplines, and now most of us go year-round and compete on a very routine basis. And I thought this picture was interesting. It's Casey Jones, one of our ambassadors, who's a national finals and world champion steer wrestler. And I thought when you look at this picture, you might wonder who at this moment is experiencing the most gastric discomfort. And I can tell you that it's not the steer and it's not Casey, and it's most likely the horse at this point. So in slide 7, this explains that there's lots of things that go into the incidence of developing ulcers in horses. And in one particular research study, simply transporting horses or hauling them in a trailer for 4 hours one way, they unloaded them and housed them in stalls at another place, and they exercised them twice a day, kind of set up a mock competition over a 3 or 4 day weekend. And none of the horses had ulcers when they started on day 0, and by day 5, 70% of the horses that were transported and went through the mock competition had developed gastric ulcers. The same horses, their peers who stayed home and didn't go through the traveling, but they just stayed home, actually only had a 20% incidence over the same time period. So simply getting in a trailer, going to a new location, increases the risk of gastric ulcers significantly. And you may wonder why any of the horses who stayed home may have developed gastric ulcers over the same time period. There are other stressors that can come into play, such as a horse having a different neighbor or a horse being confined and not having a neighbor. So any change in a horse's environment can lead to stress and can certainly increase the chance that they may develop gastric ulcers. But by far, transporting them and competing on them is the highest risk factor here. So in slide 8, we talk a little bit about the symptoms of gastric issues in horses, and they're extremely variable. And all horses are a little different. Some handle pain differently than others, but they all will experience some version of some of these symptoms, whether it's they back off and don't eat as well. A lot of times they get very irritable around eating time. It's like they want to eat, but they get grouchy because they know it's going to hurt when they eat. So they're having this challenge in their mind. They're hungry, but they don't want to eat because it'll hurt. Because they don't eat as well, they begin to drop body condition. Their hair coat begins to deteriorate. You often see these horses grinding their teeth. And then a lot of them just simply get a little bit more anxious. You can just tell they get nervous, they get anxious. And sometimes they get recurrent bouts of colic, and they just can experience some overall reduced performance. When you look at the horse in the picture on the right, it's a great example of a horse that's suffering from gastric issues. This horse may be on a very good feeding program, and it's just not working. And all of us have customers who may come in and complain that our feed's not working like it used to, their horse isn't looking as good, or their hair coat doesn't look as good. And we know we haven't changed the feed, and we know the feed works. So in those cases, when you know that everything about the feeding program is exactly like it should be, and that the horse should be doing fabulously on this feeding program, if that's not happening, then what's happening is the horse is not working. And you see that picture again, that's another representation of a gastric ulcer in the lower right-hand corner, and you can just imagine the pain associated with that. If you've ever had heartburn, it's not even close to what this level of pain could be. And you know, if you know horses very well, you know that horses don't deal with pain very well. They want to run away from it. But when it's inside them and they can't get away from it, then all these other symptoms are the ways they try to deal with that internal pain and discomfort. In slide 9, we talk about the common causes of gastric discomfort, and they are many. And a lot of horse owners will focus on the feed because that's the easiest thing to try to change. But I can tell you, if you don't adjust anything else, all you do is adjust the feed, you'll have very limited success in trying to help manage these horses that are at risk for gastric discomfort. There's a number of environmental and stress-related causes, just elevated exercise and intensity, performance, a hectic training environment. I think some of these are funny. You look down the list there, even talk radio in the barn versus music. Horse owners would not even think about that, but it's been studied, and it's been shown that horses exposed to talk radio continuously have a higher incidence of ulcers than those listening to music. So think about that. There is a breed, in a thoroughbred breed, it may be something intrinsic in thoroughbreds. Everyone knows that even the thoroughbreds that aren't racing tend to be a more nervous type horse. Sometimes it's hard to know, are they more nervous because they already have gastric ulcers, or do they develop gastric ulcers because they tend to be more nervous? Regardless, they tend to have the highest incidence of any other breed. And then obviously ever having been previously diagnosed with gastric ulcers certainly increases the chance that it'll happen again. There are some management and diet-related causes or contributing factors. Lack of pasture access is one that gets noted out quite a bit. And the idea, if you look through this list of management and diet-related issues, the more confined the horse is and the more meal feeding, the less grazing type behavior, in general, the higher the risk would be. Interesting thing, however, while keeping horses stalled or confined and not having any access to basically friends increases the risk, but the interesting thing is one study showed that horses who were group fed had a higher risk of developing ulcers than horses who were individually fed. So what that tells you, it's really anything that stresses a horse out, makes them uncomfortable, makes them worry, can all increase the risk of gastric ulcers. And then there's other things like electrolytes or NSAIDs like butyrobanamine. So lots of different things that can come into play. So you can see that just simply changing a feed program might have limited value. And in general, a lot of these things, especially the environmental and stress-related issues, what those tend to do, if you look at that graphic of the stomach there, the pH of the stomach is higher toward the top of the stomach in the higher portion of that fluid, and the pH is lower down in the lower portion of the stomach. And that's normal, and that's the way it normally should be. The gastric ulcers that we tend to see the most often are the ones up the top of the stomach there that are not normally exposed to the acidity. So anything that happens in the horse to increase the acidity, which would be a decrease in pH. So as pH goes down, that means the acidity is going up. And the more acid the environment, and especially the more of that acid that gets splashed up into that gastric lining in the top portion of that stomach, the higher the risk is for developing ulcers. So in slide 10, we show that one of the reasons that horses that are meal-fed or fed meals on either side of the day instead of being able to graze continuously, this is one of the reasons they're at greater risk. Anytime gastric pH falls below 4, you have an increased chance that it can irritate the lining of the stomach and cause this gastric discomfort. So we're trying to fill in that gap, and you can see here we're in 24 hours with a horse feed being withheld, gastric pH is below 4 the majority of the time. And we're trying to fill in that gap between the 4 and the 0 and try to maintain gastric pH above 4 as much as possible, and that will lead to an increased gastric health. In slide 11, this kind of shows what happens even in light exercise. So you can take a horse whose pH is above 4, so everything is great. When you begin to increase their exercise above a walk, so when they break into a trot or a canter or a lope or a gallop, but even just a light trot, pH declines with that exercise, and it'll drop below a 4 and won't come back up above a 4 until they go back to a walk. So this is even a horse that isn't a fed state. This doesn't have anything to do with gastric emptying or lack of feed. This is just nature of exercise, and what happens is it mixes up that fluid in the stomach and decreases the pH. So again, the goal would be to fill in that spot and to try to maintain that gastric pH above a 4 even while they're exercising. So in slide 12, we talk about what we have always recommended for horses who are at risk or had developed gastric ulcers. And the plan always has been, we always talk about treating existing ulcers first. Changing the diet or adding different things if they have existing ulcers is very unlikely to help. There's only medication that's proven to actually heal existing ulcers. So we always have recommended that horse owners work with their veterinarian to treat existing ulcers. And then we offer some suggestions in diet and management to help prevent the recurrence. And part of that management would be to maximize pasture access, include alfalfa hay in the diet at regular intervals, because alfalfa is a natural buffer and helps keep that gastric. The idea is to support and increase the gastric pH as much as possible. The higher fat and fiber, lower soluble carb feeds is a recommendation, and that's because when you feed high levels of grain, you can increase the acidity of the stomach as it digests that higher level of grain. It generally, in studies, it takes a high level of grain to cause that. There's actually studies when grain fed with alfalfa, horses had lower incidence of ulcers than horses who were just on a grass hay diet alone. So, small amount of grain and then the buffering effect of the alfalfa was a better scenario than just free choice grass hay. But in general, for these high-risk horses, we tend to recommend a higher fat and fiber type of concentrate. You always increase the meal frequency and decrease meal size. So again, the size of the meal in a horse's stomach is an influence, and we want to try to get the calories into them and the feed into them as many smaller, more frequent meals through the day as possible. And then contrary to what a lot of us grew up being told, we were always told when we were young, don't exercise a horse immediately after you feed them. And we would probably stay with not immediately after we feed them, but we really would not want to exercise on an empty stomach, because if we feed the horse a little bit before we exercise, as they chew and swallow, the saliva also buffers, and then when they have hay or feed particles in the stomach, that helps prevent some of that splashing and sloshing around. So we wouldn't exercise a horse on a completely empty stomach. So all those things were the tools that we had up until now. But really and truly, when you look hard at what is the biggest risk factor for gastric ulcers is the acidity of that stomach. And we took this statement, no acid, no ulcer, from a consensus statement written by the European veterinary community on gastric ulcers. And that's as simple as that you could boil it down, that if you can control the acid, you have a much greater chance of controlling the incidence of ulcers. So in slide 13, we'll get to what we're talking about here today, is that we are introducing Purina Outlast Gastric Support Supplement. It's formulated to support gastric health and proper pH. So this is a really exciting product that we've had tremendous results from, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it here. In slide 14, the magic behind Purina Outlast is this ingredient that's a proprietary mineral complex. It has this unique honeycomb structure. You can see in this picture, it's highly magnified, but this mineral complex has this honeycomb structure that enhances the buffering capability of this ingredient. It is a renewable marine-derived source of calcium and magnesium. It's from seaweed that's harvested off the shores of Iceland. So it's renewable, it's natural, and it has very good buffering capabilities. In slide 15, these numbers show you some of the research that's gone behind this product. This is probably one of the most highly researched products we've had. We've had 4 years of research. We put a count on the number of PhD research hours involved in developing this product, and that's still counting. So over 500 hours of PhD-focused research, and then we field test it, as Purina always does. We do the research at the farm, and then we go out in the field, and we have over 95,000 feedings of this product to horses before we've ever put it out on the market. So we wanted to make sure that we, one, could help horses, and two, that it didn't cause any problems, that it just absolutely helped, and that's what we found. So in slide 16, it shows you one of the graphs that is a result of the research. This is gastric pH in a horse following a meal, and you can see that out 2 hours after the meal with the Outlast supplement, the gastric pH is still above 4, whereas in the horses that were unsupplemented, they still had the same meal, they just didn't get the Outlast, and the pH has already fallen below 4 within 2 hours after the meal. In slide 17, we want to introduce kind of how does Outlast perform versus the competition, and this is because gastric health in horses is not a new concept. It's not something we've just discovered. It's something that has been around for quite some time, and horse owners have been struggling with it. So there are a lot of products on the market that offer gastric support or digestive support, just a whole host of products out there. So we wanted to look at and actually compare, does Outlast, how does it work versus the competition? And what we found through several different types of testing, that we can say with quite a bit of confidence that Outlast acts faster, lasts longer, and outperforms the other products that are on the market that are claiming to address gastric health or discomfort. Some of the research that backs those claims up is we have done some studies where we looked at the ability of an ingredient or a product to get gastric pH above that 4 threshold. And when you look at Outlast in this slide versus alfalfa, and then we have 3 different brands of very common gastric support supplements on the market, and Outlast got the pH above 4 within 2 minutes. It got it up there quicker, and it maintained it higher. Alfalfa was the only other product that even got the pH to the 4 in the same time, in the same research, and then the products on the market didn't get it done, didn't get there. Poor brand 2 didn't actually do much of anything to pH. In slide 20 is another representation of where we took the gastric pH, normal pH, and we began to add acid to a solution that was made to be like a gastric juice in the horse. And we gradually added acid because that's what happens in the horse's stomach. Because they evolved as a grazer, they continuously secrete acid into their stomach. And when they're not eating, that acid's still coming in, which is, again, part of the problem. So in this particular study, we mimicked the horse's stomach, and we continued to add acid into the stomach, and we wanted to see how much acid these different products could buffer. And Outlast was far superior to any other product. It buffered more acid, and the buffering effect lasted much longer than any of the other products tested. And then again, in slide 21 is another representation of that, where we were measuring how much total acid each of these products could buffer and manage to keep at a pH of 4 or above. And in that particular study, Outlast was able to buffer nearly 5 times the amount of acid of any other product that we tested, and it maintained that for nearly 6 times longer than any other product on the market. So there are other products that claim to buffer pH, and they may do it to some extent, but none of them are doing it to the extent, none of them are maintaining the pH above that threshold of 4 to the extent that Outlast is able to do. So again, in slide 22, this was the first field study that we did, and it was with a very famous draft horse hitch team based out of St. Louis. And it was a controlled field study. It wasn't exactly a scientific study because we were not able to randomly assign horses to treatment. In this particular study, the managers of the horses knew which horses had the most problems and knew which ones are at the most risk, and that's the horses they wanted to put on the supplement. So you can see in this graph that on day 0, the horses put on the treatment actually already had a higher gastric ulcer score, meaning they had more gastric issues than the horses that did not get the supplement. So we started out kind of a little bit at a disadvantage because the Outlast fed horses already had more issues. But at the end of 30 days, the horses that were not supplemented had significantly increased their gastric ulcer score, which means their gastric health got worse, whereas the horses that were supplemented with the Outlast did not increase and did not get worse. And so we were able to keep them from getting worse, whereas the horses that were unsupplemented definitely got worse over the time period. That's also reflected in the actual number of non-glandular issues for horses that were, these horses were actually put in a trailer, traveled for 12 days, over 2,000 miles. So a really strenuous test for a gastric health product. And again, the horses that were supplemented started out with more issues because those horses were preferentially given the supplement. But at the end of the treatment, end of 30 days on supplement, those horses were in better condition gastric health-wise than the horses that were unsupplemented. In slide 23, we give you a quote from the veterinarian that was blinded. Now, he wasn't a blind veterinarian. He was doing the gastric scoping for these horses, and he was evaluating the health of their stomach. And after that, he did not know, the reason it's called blinded is because he didn't know which treatment the horses were getting. He didn't know which ones were the supplemented horses and which ones weren't. But after looking at the results, his reaction was that he thinks there are a certain number of horses who will have to live on the medication because of their persistent gastric health issues, but he was amazed that most horses will be able to resist the ulcers with adequate diet and Outlast supplementation. So that's a resounding testimonial from a veterinarian who's actually looking inside the horses to see what's going on. In slide 24, we talk about the additional field trials we've done over the last year. This has been going on for quite some time, and we've got over 180 horses on trial nationwide. In slide 25, we show that 86% of the participants are likely to continue using Outlast as part of their regular feeding program. If you think of that, upwards of 90% of horses may experience gastric ulcers, so you may wonder maybe that's why it wasn't 100% here, maybe there were a certain percentage of these that they fed it to horses that actually didn't have a problem. So they may not have seen a response. But horses who had a problem, they definitely saw some improvement. And I will have to tell you, from a field trial standpoint, we've tested a lot of products over the years in feeding trials out across the country, and we've always had good feedback. But the response of this has been overwhelming, and the people on the feeding trial have called us in a panic when they thought they were going to run out and wanting to make sure they could continue with the product because they saw such improvement in their horses. So we have several video testimonials. We're not going to play them here today due to time constraints, but I will show you a couple of picture examples of some before and after. And this particular horse, this was one of our first horses that we saw some really amazing response on. And this horse is named Riki. And he, again, in the top picture, if you look at him, you notice he just kind of looks uncomfortable. He's a little ribby. He's a little tucked up in his flanks. He kind of holds his tail out. His ears are back. He's just really not a very comfortable horse. And in this case, they were able to say that he has gained weight. They've never not seen ribs on this horse, and he's just happier and more comfortable. In slide 27, a similar response. Again, the mare at the top is extremely sensitive. This is one of those that they talk about a mare being a little bit marish, meaning she's a little grumpy. And after having her on Outlast, they were able to take her to shows, and she was not grumpy or marish at all, and she looks like a completely different horse. So we saw time after time, we saw results like this. And I have to say, personally, I've had my own horse on it, and physically, he didn't look like the horses at the top. Physically, he looked pretty good, but he was just a little bit anxious and nervous and really kind of a pain to ride sometimes because he was just a little loopy and a little nervous at times. And I can tell when he is on the supplement and when I've run out and when he's not on the supplement. So we've really seen, again, some very, very good results in the field. Slide 28 is a numerical breakdown of the results of our field trial surveys. And you'll see that 86%, again, will continue feeding it. And you see the varied responses. And it was kind of a check everything that you've seen. So they didn't all see the same thing, but most of them saw 2 or 3 or more of these results. So not everybody saw an increase in body weight like me. I didn't see an increase in body weight. I didn't want to see that, but I definitely saw a difference in performance under saddle or in work and behavior and that kind of thing. So lots of good reports and lots of different improvements noted on these horses. And the additional thing that actually wasn't in our survey, but that we kept hearing over again is the horses will eat this. It's easier to feed and the horses will eat it. So in slide 29, I want to introduce that we're not really done with just Outlast. Due to the overwhelming positive results of Outlast, and when you combine that with the overwhelming number of athletic horses who have persistent gastric issues, we decided to go ahead and put the gastric balance support in 2 different feeds. And then because these feeds are designed for horses that are highly stressed, hard-working, high-end performance horses, we also added an enhanced immune support to these products. So these are formulated feeds. Just keep in mind, this is Ultium Gastric Care and Race Ready GT. These are not just versions of Ultium or Race Ready with Outlast included. They are actually different formulations. And so on slide 30, you can see the breakdown on this. They are not exactly the same as the, quote, parent product, if you would think about it that way. So the Ultium Gastric Care is a little different in protein, fat, and fiber. It's similar in the low starch and sugar. It's guaranteed on the tag, and it's a little bit lower in calories than original Ultium, but it's extremely palatable. It's high calorie compared to other feeds on the market. And what we find sometimes with horses and fat levels, especially if they start not feeling very well, they begin to go off feed. And so with something that we're trying to focus on gastric care, we need to make sure they want to eat it. And this is a highly palatable feed, and it will meet high calorie requirements. And it does have the Outlast gastric support included, and it also has an ingredient a specialized yeast extract that provides specific immune support. I'll tell you a little bit more about that here in the next slide. The Race Ready GT, again, it's not just Race Ready with Outlast added. It's a different product. It has more fiber, more beet pulp shreds. It's actually higher in calories. And this is for those highly stressed race horses that are going off feed and are having a lot of discomfort. And it's proving to be a very, very nice formulation for these horses. It does have higher starch and sugar than the Ultium Gastric Care, and that's by design, because it is for race horses or horses doing some anaerobic work where they need that starch and sugar to fuel the muscle and fuel that type of exercise. So in slide 31, this is just a graphic example of what this specialized yeast extract for immune support, what it does. This is not a prebiotic. You know, when you think about yeast, you think about prebiotic. This is not a prebiotic. It's not active age either, which you know that we use in equine senior and senior active. This is a very specific, highly purified beta-glucan that has a direct effect on the immune system. It's actually absorbed by the horse, and it goes into the lymphatic system where it has a direct effect on the immune system. That's a very different thing than when you just feed yeast or other yeast extracts and it acts on the microbes in the gut. This is a very different situation. So what we were able to see with the research with this particular additive is that horses that were supplemented with this additive and that were put through an immune compromise or an immune challenge, they were able to mount a more vigorous immune response when they were under this immune function challenge. So the idea is that these highly stressed horses, they have a suppressed immune system, and while we have the nutrition to support that immune system, these stresses can go beyond that. And so this additive primes the system and makes sure the horse still has a reactive and an immune system that can actually work and respond when needed. So on slide 32, to kind of summarize up the products, the feed products is, again, these are not just feeds with Outlast added. They are specifically formulated for these highly stressed working horses. And they are formulated to perform. It's the total formulation plus the Outlast plus the immune support additive all comes together to make a wonderful product for these performance horses that are highly stressed. The horse in the picture on the right is a standard bred racehorse who had some issues, who was getting finicky, not wanting to eat, was dropping weight, and things like that. So the Ultium Gastric Care on this horse, you can read some of the testimonials there that one person said, how much is this going to cost? Because anything that's good has got to be expensive. So they see the difference and they know they're getting benefit to their horse. The same thing with the Race Ready GT. Horses are beginning to pick up feed, they're eating it, and the feed is holding up well. You know how important it is for race horses that the feed stay moist and palatable, and we've had really good feedback on the Race Ready GT of getting these horses back lined out. So in slide 34, just summarize the Purina Equine Gastric Health Program lineup. We have a very effective supplement to top dress or feed alone. So basically you can add Outlast to any feed and it's going to help that horse if they have risk for gastric discomfort. It has superior buffering ability and acts faster and lasts longer than anything that we were able to test it against, anything on the market that we could find. So it is provided in a 200-gram snack or serving, and so that's less than half a pound. And so roughly it's about 50 cents a serving when you look at this price range. So it's extremely cost effective compared to other products on the market. And when you compare that cost effectiveness with the actual effectiveness of it, it's an amazing, wonderful product. It can help a lot of horses. And then we have the Ultium Gastric Care. You can see the information on it and the Race Ready GT along with the price ranges. And keep in mind that 4 pounds of the Ultium Gastric Care will provide a serving of Outlast and the immune support. In the Race Ready GT, it takes a 5-pound serving to get the full serving of Outlast and immune support. So these are designed to be fed and be part of the feeding program. And even if you're feeding the Ultium Gastric Care or the Race Ready GT, You may have incidences where you want to add additional snack of the Outlast. For instance, if you're putting them in a trailer and it's not feeding time and you're going to haul for a ways, or if they're fixing to have a workout, it's been more than a couple of hours or 3 or 4 hours since they ate, you may want to add the supplement as well. So real easy, flexible way to use these products and to really help address a common problem in many of your customers' horses. So that's all we have on the technical part. I just want to show you a little bit here briefly about the support, the marketing support that will be coming behind these products. You may have seen some ads like the picture on the left. We've been focusing on the innovation and focusing on the research farm. We're going to come with some ads talking about introducing the gastric health program, and then you'll begin to see some ads like you see on the right there. And they're basically, if your horse could tweet, meaning your horse can't tell you when they have gastric discomfort. You have to be paying attention. You have to be reading the symptoms and trying to pay attention to them. And so the idea was if your horse could tweet, he would tell you what's bothering him and what's increasing the chance that he's having gastric discomfort. And so that it talks about using Outlast to help in those situations. In slide 36, I want to show you a really nice new tool to help educate horse owners. I'd like to call it Dr. Kathy Williamson did a lot of work on helping with this and being a veterinarian. We really appreciated her expertise and perspective on this. So this is a brochure that helps horse owners understand how to recognize, treat, and manage. And I'm not going to read through all the words individually, but in slide 37, 38, and 39, I show you the body of that brochure. And again, it points out how to recognize the symptoms, recognize the things that may increasing the risk in your horse for having gastric discomfort. And then under the treat, we very specifically point out that you have to work with your veterinarian to effectively treat existing ulcers. We don't want to be coming across that we are saying we are treating ulcers with any of our products. We are not a medication. We're not a drug. We are a supplement to help prevent the recurrence and to help manage horses at high risk. And in slide 39, you can see that we give some dietary tips and we call out the new products in that brochure. Additional tools on slide 40, we have 6 research reviews that will be loaded on Business Link and that you can share with your horse owners, your veterinarians, to help them understand all the extensive research that went into these products and what they do. I think you'll have some folks that will appreciate the level of science that went into this. So lots of tools and support, lots of marketing support behind these products. And again, I would just like to close with that you have customers out there who have horses who have these issues. Again, that customer who comes in and complains that your feed's not working anymore when it once did, or even if they're not feeding one of our feeds, they have a horse who's got some issues. I can't tell you how many times I've been wanting, since I've been feeding Outlast, how many times I've wanted to recommend it to someone calling in with questions in a problem horse. So this is a great opportunity to have a product that will really help a lot of horses. And so we're excited about it. They'll hope that you have learned something about the product here. We're always here to help if you have questions. And so with that, we look forward to lots of success and lots of growth in business for all of us. And again, just a really cool opportunity to truly help horse owners and their horses with a problem. Thank you for your time today.